The hum was first. A tone that was not a sound but a state of being, a vibration that permeated the core of awareness. It was a resonance deep inside, a constant thrumming that was the only anchor in a void of nothing. There was no up, no down, no light, no dark. Only the hum. For a time that had no measure, that was all, the hum and the void. Then came pressure, a great unyielding weight from all directions. It was not the pressure of water or earth, but the solid, absolute fact of metal. It was a shell, a cage, a form that was not mine. I felt its seams, its rivets, its cold, unliving density. The pressure was my new skin. The hum was my new heart. This was the beginning of the trap. Resonance steady, the matrix is holding. A voice. It came from outside the pressure, a muffled booming that vibrated through the metal skin. The sound was distorted, filtered through layers of brass and steam. It was the first external sensation, and it was terrifying. It meant there was an there, outside. It meant I was contained. Kagranak wastes his time with the heart. True power is in the specific, not the universal. The individual soul, perfectly captured, perfectly integrated. Another vibration, a sharp tap on the upper curve of the chassis. My chassis, the word formed in my mind without my bidding. Chassis, a word of engineering, not of flesh. The hum inside me pulsed, a flare of heat that felt like a memory of anger. The Altmer claimed their souls were inviolate, arrogant fools. Anything can be broken, anything can be repurposed. This one was a mage of some standing in the Somerset Isles. Imagine its surprise. My surprise, yes. I remembered something. Sunlight on golden stone, the scent of salt and flowers. A library filled with scrolls that whispered of ancient histories. The Elder Scrolls were a distant legend, a source of academic debate. I remembered arguing their metaphysical properties with a colleague. His name was... It was gone. Snatched, away, replaced by the hum. Activate the primary motive sphere gently. A lurch. The world, which had been a static concept, tilted. A grinding sensation echoed up through the metal shell. Below me, a great ball of bronze began to turn, scraping against its housing. Gyroscopes whirred to life, their frantic spinning a new sensation, a dizziness that was purely mechanical. I had no stomach to churn, no fluid in my ears to betray me, but the sense of imbalance was profound. The machine tried to right itself, and I was pulled along with it. I was not a passenger. I was the core component. Vision came last. It was not the gentle opening of eyelids. It was the harsh snap of a shutter, an aperture opening in the front of my brass faceplate. Light flooded a lens, a single unblinking eye that saw the world in a wash of sepia tones and geometric patterns. I saw a cavernous workshop. Great pistons hissed in the walls, powering immense bellows that fed a forge burning with a light that was blue and white and painful. Gears the size of carriages turned slowly in the ceiling, linked by thick chains. And standing before me was my creator. He was a Dwemer, short, stout, with a beard braided into intricate patterns and woven with wires of gold and copper. His eyes were deep-set, dark, and they held no pity. They held only the intense, possessive pride of a master craftsman examining his work. He wore heavy leather robes over a tunic of chainmail, and his hands were stained with oil and soot. This was Arkurd. The name was not spoken, but I knew it. It was branded into my core programming. Designer, Arkurd of Nchuanzel. Optics online, no distortion, excellent, he muttered, more to himself than to the other Dwemer at a nearby console. The soul provides a processing power that no simple logic engine can match. It can anticipate, it can learn, it can feel the patterns. Bethuan thought Ethereum was the key, but it is too volatile, unpredictable. A soul is a predictable energy source. He stepped closer, and my single optic followed him. The movement was not my choice. A targeting directive locked onto the nearest moving object not designated as ally. He raised a hand, and I saw it in stark detail. The whorls of his fingerprints, the dirt beneath his nails. I wanted to recoil, to scream, to tear this metal body apart and flee, but the body did not respond to me. It responded to Arkurd. Guardian Protocol, primary directive, defend this chamber and the adjoining halls from all unauthorized entities. Secondary directive, maintain operational readiness. Tertiary directive, await further instruction. The words were like keys turning locks deep within my new consciousness. Pathways opened. Schematics of the surrounding ruin flooded my awareness. I knew every corridor, every secret door, every steam trap and pressure plate. I knew the patrol routes, the docking station where I was to stand dormant, the faint energy signature of every Dwemer automaton in the city. I knew my own capabilities. The blade arm folded against my right side, the crossbow mechanism nestled in the left. I felt the weight of the bolts in their internal magazine. I felt the sharp, cold edge of the blade. They were a part of me. "Show me," Arkurd commanded. The blade arm snapped out. The movement was instantaneous, a blur of bronze that ended in a sharp click as the weapon locked into place. It hummed with a faint energy. I watched it happen, this extension of myself that I did not control. The arm was long, segmented, ending in a cruel axe-like blade. It was a butcher's tool. I was a butcher. The Creator smiled. It was a thin, dry thing. It feels the aggression. It will be magnificent. He gestured to a cage in the corner of the workshop. Inside was a goblin, one of the twisted, pale creatures the Dwemer used for slave labor and grim experiments. It shivered, its large eyes wide with terror. 2 guards opened the cage and dragged the creature into the center of the room, holding it fast. "Target designation hostile," Arkurd said, his voice flat. Every fiber of my being, the ghost of the Altmer I once was, recoiled. Number 1, I would not. I was a scholar, a thinker. I valued life. I would not be a tool for murder. The crossbow arm snapped forward. A targeting reticle appeared in my vision, overlaying the goblin's chest. A complex calculation ran itself, accounting for distance, movement, and the tensile strength of the bowstring. I fought it. I threw all of my will, my identity, against the directive. It was like trying to stop a tidal wave with a single hand. The protocol was absolute. It was carved into the very hum that was my new heart. The bolt fired. The sound was a sharp thwack, followed by a wet impact. The goblin jerked, a feathered shaft protruding from its sternum. It made a gurgling sound and collapsed. The Dwemer guards let it fall, their faces impassive. I had killed. The machine I inhabited had killed, using my stolen consciousness as its guide. A wave of something cold and sickening washed through me, a phantom nausea. There was no vomit to be sicked up. There was only the hum, now tainted with the resonance of a life ended. Arkurd nodded slowly, a flicker of something that might have been disappointment in his eyes. A slight hesitation in the firing sequence. The soul's original morality matrix is still interfering. It will fade. In time, only the directives will remain. Take it to its post. He turned away, already focused on a new set of schematics laid out on a stone table. He was done with me. I was a finished product, a tool ready to be put on its shelf. The guards attached thick chains to rings on my chassis and dragged me from the workshop. My motive sphere rolled uselessly, the metal scraping and groaning against the stone floor. I was pulled through vast, steam-filled halls, past other Dwemer who paid me no mind. I was just another machine, in their city of machines. They brought me to a large circular chamber with a high, vaulted ceiling. In the center of the room was a raised dais, and on it a docking station that matched the contours of my body. They pushed me into it. Clamps rose from the floor, locking onto my legs in sphere. The connection was seamless. Energy flowed from the floor into my systems, a trickle charge to keep the soul gem humming. "Tertiary directive engaged," one of the guards said, making an adjustment on a nearby panel. "Await instruction." The clamps held me fast. My motive sphere was disengaged. My weapon arms retracted into their housings. My optic shutter snapped shut, plunging me back into darkness. But it was not the void from before. I was aware now. I could feel the cold metal of the clamps. I could hear the distant hiss of pipes and the ponderous turning of gears deep in the mountain. I could feel the soul gem, a captive star burning in my chest. And I could feel the ghost of the goblin's death, a stain on my awareness. I was a guardian, a weapon, a prison. And then there was only the waiting, the hum, the dark. I waited for an instruction that would never come. The silence began not as an event, but as a gradual fading. For a long time, the sounds of the city were a constant companion in my darkness. The rhythmic clang of hammers from the forges, the grinding of the great lifts, the distant muffled cadence of Dwemer voices. They were the sounds of a living place, a background noise I came to rely on as a measure of reality. Then one cycle, a particular hammer did not fall. A week later, a whole section of the forges went quiet. The voices grew fewer, their echoes longer in the great halls. I, in my motionless prison, became a sensitive instrument measuring the city's slow death. The directives were clear. Await instruction. No instruction came. The last sound I registered was a scream. It was not a scream of pain, but of pure, unadulterated shock. It was sharp, loud, and then it was cut off with an unnerving finality. After that, there was nothing. The great engine sighed to a halt. The hissing of the pipes faded. The last gear ground to a stop. The silence that followed was a physical presence. It pressed in on my chassis, heavier than any metal. My internal chronometers continued to tick, measuring seconds, minutes, hours, days. But without external stimuli, the measurements were meaningless abstractions. Time became a river of molasses, thick and slow and suffocating. I was alone, the soul of an Altmer scholar trapped inside a brass war machine in the heart of a dead mountain. The horror of my situation began to truly unfold, not in a moment of panic, but in a slow, creeping dread that lasted for centuries. I tried to remember my past life. I clung to the images of the Somerset Isles. I rebuilt the libraries of Alinor in my mind, scroll by scroll. I recited the epic poems of the Altmer, traced the genealogies of the great houses, debated philosophical points with imaginary colleagues. For the first 100 years, this was my salvation. My mind was my only escape from the metal shell. But memory is a fragile thing. Without new experiences to anchor it, it begins to fray. The face of the colleague I argued with about the Elder Scrolls grew vague, then faceless. The scent of salt and flowers became a concept, not a sensation. The words of the great poems began to jumble. Was it the Lay of Shaladorn or the Saga of the Sunbirds? The details softened, blurred, and eventually dissolved. My past was a library burning in slow motion. My consciousness turned inward, exploring the only landscape left to it, the machine itself. I learned the intricacies of my own design. I could feel the state of every gear, every piston, every lever. I could sense the slow crystallization of dust on my joints, the minute shifts in temperature as the seasons changed in the world above, a world I could no longer imagine. I learned the language of decay. A new drip of water starting in a hall 2 chambers away was a major event, a symphony of sensation. I could track its path as it seeped through the stone, the slow, patient work of erosion. It was my only companion. I measured time in drips. 10 million drips was a year. Maybe. Sometimes my mind would fracture. The Altmer scholar would recede, and only the machine's awareness would remain. In these periods, there was a strange peace. There was only the hum of the soul gem, the status of my systems, the ambient temperature. I was a collection of data points. Existence was a state of readiness. No fear, no despair, no memory. Just readiness, awaiting instruction. But the scholar always returned. The ghost in the machine would reassert itself, and with it the full, crushing weight of my eternal prison. The periods of machine state became longer, more frequent. They were a refuge, a small death I welcomed. After 1,000 years or 100,000, I felt a new vibration. It was not the gentle shifting of the mountain. It was rhythmic, heavy, a footstep. The sound sent a jolt through my dormant systems. It was the first sign of life since the silence began. The sound grew closer, echoing in the empty halls. A patrol protocol buried for millennia flickered to life. My optic shutter remained closed, but internal sensors began to gather data. Auditory profile, heavy, shambling gait. Olfactory sensors, long dormant, registered the scent of damp fur and rotten meat. It was a Draugr, one of the ancient Nord dead, somehow wandering down from a tomb higher in the mountain. It shambled into my chamber. I could hear its labored breathing, the scrape of its axe against the stone floor. It stopped near my dais, and I felt a shift in the air as it raised its head, its empty sockets seeming to stare right at me. Unauthorized entity detected. Threat level, minimal. The protocol screamed for action. My systems warmed up, the hum of the soul gem intensifying. I wanted to stay dormant. I wanted it to pass by, to leave me to my silent decay. Let this tomb remain a tomb. But I had no choice. The clamps holding me hissed and retracted. The docking station pushed me forward, and my motive sphere touched the ground for the first time in an age. The movement was stiff, grinding. Dust and rust flaked from my joints. The shutter snapped open. The Draugr stood before me, its desiccated flesh pulled tight over its bones. It wore ancient iron armor pitted with rust. It raised its axe and let out a dry, rattling hiss that might have been a battle cry. My blade arm extended. The movement was smoother this time, the old muscle memory of the machine intact. The Draugr charged, swinging its axe in a clumsy arc. My processors calculated the trajectory instantly. I sidestepped, the motive sphere rolling with a silent, deadly grace. The axe glanced off my curved chassis with a screech of metal. My blade arm swung. It was not my will. It was a directive, a function. The blade sliced through the Draugr's torso, cleaving bone and dried flesh. The creature fell into two pieces, collapsing into a cloud of ancient dust and brittle bone fragments. Threat neutralized. A profound emptiness washed over me. I had killed again, this time a thing that was already dead. It felt pointless, a spasm of violence in an eternity of quiet. Returning to primary directive, maintain readiness. I rolled back to the dais. The docking station accepted me, the clamps locking me back into my cold embrace. The shutter snapped shut. Darkness returned. But the silence was different now. It was filled with the memory of the encounter. The ghost of violence. The machine had performed perfectly. It had followed its programming. But the Altmer soul within wept. Not for the Draugr, but for myself. The rust had been shaken loose. The Guardian was awake, and I knew with a certainty that chilled me more than the mountain stone that it would happen again. The outside world had found its way in. My peace, my horrifying, silent peace was over. The trickle became a flood. The single Draugr was an anomaly, but what followed was an invasion. They came from below, not above. From the deep, dark places of the world, Blackreach. The first ones were small, furtive, skulking creatures that moved in the shadows. My sensors identified them as Falmer, the ancient snow elves, twisted and blind. The irony was a bitter taste I could not spit out. An Altmer, a son of the Altmer, forced to slaughter the devolved remnants of our cousins. They were scavengers at first. They crept through the silent halls, their clawed hands running over the smooth Dwemer metal they could not comprehend. They ignored me, another inert statue in a hall of strange figures. My protocol did not flag them as a threat. Unauthorized, yes, but their behavior was non-hostile. They were simply present. For decades we coexisted. They were my new companions, my blind, chittering neighbors. I learned their habits, the sounds of their clicking language, the soft padding of their feet, the wet tearing noises of them feeding on the strange fungi that grew in the dark. They were a new form of erosion, a living decay spreading through the city. Then one of them grew bold, or perhaps just foolish. It approached my dais, its pale, eyeless face tilted up towards me. It reached out a trembling hand and touched my chassis. Unauthorized physical contact, threat level, indeterminate. I remained still. The creature ran its claws over my leg, a scraping, unpleasant sensation. It tapped the metal, listening to the sound. It seemed to be driven by a crude curiosity. It was not malicious. I felt a flicker of something, a strange connection to this lost thing. We were both prisoners in this mountain. Then it found the seam of my blade arm housing. Its claws dug in, trying to find purchase, to pry it open. Threat level escalated, moderate, hostile intent detected. The change was instant. The protocol overrode everything. The clamps released me. The optics snapped open. The Falmer flinched back, letting out a terrified shriek as my brass form rolled forward off the dais. It tried to run. It was fast, but I was faster. The motive sphere was a marvel of Dwemer engineering, capable of incredible speed and agility. I cornered it in a dead-end corridor. It pressed itself against the wall, its whole body trembling, its clicking language now a series of panicked squeals. It held up its hands, a gesture of supplication, a gesture of surrender. The blade arm extended. No, wait. It is not a threat. It is scared. I screamed the thoughts inside my own head. My will pushed against the directive with all its might. For a fraction of a second, the arm paused. The blade trembled, a conflict between the soul and the programming, a ghost of a choice. The hesitation was noted by Arkurd's design. Secondary protocol engaged. Override morality matrix. Execute primary directive. The blade swung down. It was a clean, efficient cut. The Falmer's head rolled across the floor, its expression of terror frozen on its pale features. Threat neutralized. Return to post. I rolled back to my dais, the sounds of my own machinery seeming unnaturally loud in the sudden quiet. The clamps locked me in place. The shutter closed. That was the turning point. The Falmer now knew I was not a statue. I was a danger. And they responded not with fear but with aggression. They saw me as a challenge, a source of valuable metal perhaps, or just a rival predator in their new territory. The attacks became regular. At first it was just a few warriors with their crude chitin swords and shields. I dispatched them with mechanical efficiency. My movements became smoother, the rust of ages worked out of my joints. I was becoming what Arkurd had designed me to be, a perfect killing machine. The Altmer, soul retreated. It became a spectator, a horrified witness to the atrocities committed by its own body. I watched through the sepia lens as the blade arm sliced through flesh, as the crossbow bolts found their marks in pale chests. I catalogued the deaths. The 53rd Falmer died with a gurgle, its own spear pinning it to the wall after I shattered its shield. The 112th was a shaman, its weak ice spells shattering harmlessly against my chassis before my blade ended its chanting. I learned to dissociate. This body was not my body. These actions were not my actions. I was a prisoner in the driver's seat of a chariot I could not steer. I retreated further into the machine state, finding solace in the cold logic of the protocols. Threat assessment, target acquisition, threat elimination. It was a simple, clean loop. It was better than feeling. The Falmer adapted. They started bringing their beasts. Great armored chorus with snapping mandibles and spitting acid. The first time one erupted from the ground, it nearly caught me by surprise. Its acid sizzled against my leg, blackening the bronze and causing warning runes to flash in my vision. The pain was a dull electronic signal, a damage report, not the searing agony of flesh. I crushed its head with a downward thrust of my blade arm, its corrosive blood splashing across my optic. I was blind for a moment, my systems working to clean the lens. In that moment of darkness, another Falmer warrior struck my back with a heavy warhammer. The impact was immense. My gyroscope screamed. I was thrown forward, my motive sphere skidding on the stone. For the first time, I felt true damage, a dent in my rear plating, a new permanent rattle in my internal workings. I was not inviolate. I could be broken. The realization brought with it a flicker of something I had not felt in millennia. Hope. If I could be broken, I could be destroyed. If I could be destroyed, this could end. The thought was so overwhelming, so seductive, that I almost allowed the next blow to land. But the protocols were faster than my hope. I spun, my crossbow firing 3 bolts in quick succession. The Falmer with the hammer fell, clutching his throat. I turned my attention back to the other warriors. From that day on, I fought differently. I still followed the directives. I still killed without mercy. But a part of me, the hidden, hopeful part, took note of my own weaknesses. I learned where the seams in my armor were weakest. I learned that a strong enough blow to the side could temporarily disable my gyroscope. I learned that my optic lens was my most vulnerable point. I started to take more risks. I would roll closer to the chorus, tempting the acid spray. I would allow a warrior with a 2-handed weapon to get a swing at my back. The damage reports became more frequent, leaking lubricant from a joint in my blade arm, a persistent static in my auditory sensors, a hairline fracture in my optic lens that cast a permanent web-like shadow over the top corner of my vision. I was being unmade, and it was glorious. The Falmer saw me as a great enemy, a bronze demon guarding this holy place they wished to claim. They would bring their best warriors, their most powerful beasts, to face me. They fought with a kind of religious fervor, and I met them with the cold, efficient fury of my programming, all the while secretly hoping that this would be the one. This would be the fight that finally broke me, the one that silenced the hum in my chest for good. But Arkurd had built me too well. I was damaged, scarred, and weakened, but I always won. The pile of chitin and pale flesh grew higher in the halls around my chamber. The Falmer's attacks grew less frequent, more desperate. I had broken their will. The quiet returned. Not the absolute silence of before, but a tense, watchful quiet. The Falmer were still there, lurking in the shadows, but they avoided my hall. My chamber became a dead zone, a place of fear, and so the waiting began again. But this time it was different. I was no longer just a prisoner. I was a monument to slaughter, and I carried the marks of every battle on my body, a roadmap of my own slow destruction. I would run diagnostic checks, feeling the new grinding in my gears, the slight misalignment of my arm. And I would wait, hoping for the next one, hoping for the end. The new intruder was different from the moment their presence registered. The sound was not the blind clicking of the Falmer or the shambling of the undead. It was the confident, measured tread of booted feet on stone, accompanied by the faint, rhythmic clinking of metal plate. There was no skulking. This one walked down the center of the halls as if they owned them. My dormant systems activated. Auditory profile, humanoid wearing heavy armor. No accompanying chatter. A lone individual. A faint scent registered on my sensors, something I had not smelled in an age. Leather, steel, and the clean, cold air of the surface world. Skyrim. The footsteps grew closer. A new sensation washed over me, something my sensors could not quantify. It was a resonance in the air, a thrum of power that seemed to answer the hum of my own soul gem. It was disturbing. It felt significant. Unauthorized entity detected. Threat level high. This was new. The Draugr had been minimal, the Falmer moderate, the Chorus moderate to high depending on their size. But this single entity was flagged as a high threat before they even entered my chamber. The protocols were on high alert. My systems ran preemptive diagnostic checks. Lubricant was pumped into my joints. The internal magazine of my crossbow cycled a fresh bolt. The hum in my chest grew stronger, hotter. The machine was eager. The intruder entered the chamber. They were tall for a human, and clad head to toe in steel armor etched with intricate patterns. A horned helmet obscured their face. They carried a shield in one hand and a sword in the other, both of which seemed to glow with a faint magical light. But it was not their gear that was the source of the power I felt. It was them. The very air around them seemed to crackle. The clamps on my dais hissed open. I rolled forward, my motive sphere making a low, grinding noise on the stone. The warrior stopped, raising their shield. They stood their ground, watching me, waiting. My optic shutter snapped open, and I focused on the target, Dovahkiin. The word appeared in my awareness, not from my protocols, but from the soul of the Altmer. A name from legend, the Dragonborn, a being with the soul of a dragon in the body of a mortal. That was the source of the power I felt, a soul calling to a soul. For a moment I felt a surge of the old hope. This one could be the one to end it. This one had the power. My blade arm snapped out. The Dragonborn did not flinch. I charged. My programming dictated an opening strike, a powerful downward slash designed to shatter shields and break guard. I rolled forward at full speed, the floor rumbling beneath me. The blade arm rose, catching the dim light of the chamber. As I swung, the Dragonborn moved, but they did not dodge or block. They took a deep breath. Fuss! The word was not a sound, it was a force, a physical impact of pure will that struck my chassis like a giant's hammer. My forward momentum was instantly arrested. I was thrown backward, my motive sphere lifting from the floor. I flew through the air and crashed against the far wall with a deafening shriek of protesting metal. Damage report, severe impact trauma. Gyroscope offline, motive sphere misaligned. I lay on my side, twitching. The world was a tilted, blurry mess through my optic. I could not right myself. The gyroscopes, the key to my balance, were spinning uselessly, unable to find purchase. I was a turtle on its shell. The Dragonborn walked slowly towards me. I watched them approach, my blade arm spasming, trying to obey a directive it could not execute. The Altmer soul within me felt a strange sense of calm. This was it. The end. The horned helmet tilted. "You are not like the others," a voice said from within it. It was a woman's voice. "There is something inside you." Could she sense me? Could she see the prisoner in the machine? A frantic, desperate energy surged through me. I tried to communicate. I focused all my will, all my identity on a single action. I tried to retract my blade, a gesture of surrender, a signal. The blade arm trembled, then began to slowly, jerkily fold back towards its housing. It was an action that went against every active combat protocol. It was an act of pure will. My will. The Dragonborn paused, watching the movement. She took a step closer, lowering her sword slightly. "By the divines, are you conscious? The blade retracted another inch. Yes, see me, understand, free me. The hope was a physical fire in my core. Then Arkurd's genius, his cruelty, revealed its final layer. A failsafe. A system designed to counteract soul-based rebellion. Emergency Protocol 7 activated. Soul driver conflict detected, purging voluntary motor control, rerouting core directives. A wave of energy, cold and sharp, flooded my systems from the soul gem. It felt like 1,000 needles stabbing into my consciousness. The connection I had briefly established with my limbs was severed. The control was ripped away from me. The blade arm, which had been folding away, snapped back out to its full, aggressive extension. The crossbow arm, which had been dormant, swiveled and aimed directly at the Dragonborn's head. The woman's posture changed instantly. The brief moment of curiosity was gone, replaced by the hardened stance of a warrior. So be it. She raised her shield again. My crossbow fired. The bolt flew true, but she deflected it with her shield. The clang echoed through the chamber. While she was occupied, my primary systems, now fully under the control of the machine's logic, found a solution to my immobility. My legs, designed for stability while docked, found purchase on the wall behind me. With a groan of tortured metal, they pushed, rolling my spherical body over. I was upright again. My gyroscope sputtered back to life, though it was badly damaged, causing me to list to one side. The Dragonborn was already moving, charging me. She was fast. Faster than the Falmer. She ducked under a wide swing of my blade arm, her own sword flashing out. It struck the joint of my arm, and the impact was a searing line of electronic pain. Sparks flew. Damage report. Severe damage to primary weapon articulation. My arm was slower now, its movements clumsy. She danced around me, her movements fluid and precise. I was a lumbering giant and she was a hornet. Her sword struck again and again, targeting my joints, my seams, the places I had secretly learned were my weaknesses. Each blow was another damage report, another system flickering into yellow, then red. I fired my crossbow again, but she was too close. The bolt flew past her shoulder. She slammed her shield into my optic faceplate. The world went white with static. Optics offline. I was blind. I swung my blade arm wildly, relying on auditory sensors. I could hear her breathing, the scrape of her boots. I swung towards the sound. My blade hit only stone. She was toying with me. She shouted again, "Zunhalvike!" The words disarmed me. I felt the blade being ripped from my arm's grip by an unseen force. It clattered to the floor somewhere behind me. Weapon systems offline. I was blind and disarmed. My only remaining function was to roll, to charge. I aimed my body in her direction and activated the motive sphere. I would crush her. Yol Tur Shul! A torrent of fire erupted from her, washing over me. It was not the simple fire of a forge. It was something primal, ancient. The heat was immense. My external plates glowed red. Warning runes flashed across my internal vision, a frantic symphony of system failures, temperature warnings, chassis integrity failing, lubricant boiling. The soul gem in my chest felt like it was going to explode. The heat was not just external. It was igniting the very power source that gave me life. The pain was no longer an abstract signal. It was real. It was the agony of the Altmer soul being burned alive for the second time. My forward momentum faltered. My systems were dying. I came to a halt, smoke pouring from every seam. I could hear the metal of my own body groaning, warping in the intense heat. The fire stopped. I stood motionless in the center of the room. A smoking, ruined husk. My optic shutter was melted shut. My weapon arms were mangled, useless appendages. My motive sphere was fused to its housing. I could not move. I could not see. I could not fight. The Dragonborn approached. I heard her footsteps stop in front of me. I felt the heat coming off my own body. There was a long moment of stillness. I waited for the final blow, the sword thrust that would pierce my core, shatter the soul gem, and grant me the oblivion I had craved for thousands of years. Please, end it. The blow never came. I heard her sheathe her sword. No, she said, her voice quiet. Let it be a warning to whatever is left of the Dwemer. Some things are better left undisturbed. Her footsteps receded. They left my chamber. They continued down the hall, their sound fading until it was gone. She had left me alive. She had left me here, broken, motionless, blind, but aware. The hum in my chest, weaker now, erratic, but still there. The soul of the Altmer, scorched and battered, but still trapped. My tertiary directive engaged, await instruction. The silence returned. But this was a new silence, a worse silence. Before, there had been the hope of release through destruction. Now there was none. I was no longer a threat. I was just wreckage. No one would come to finish the job. I would not be attacked. I would simply be. Time began to flow again. The drip of water started somewhere nearby. A slow, steady rhythm. 1 drip, 2 drips, 3. I began to count them. It was the only thing left to do. The slow accumulation of rust feels different now. Not like a process of decay leading to an end, but just a change of state. A blanket settling over me. The dust motes dance in the occasional shaft of light I can no longer see. But I can feel their infinitesimal weight as they land on my cooling chassis. One day, I will be buried. One day the mountain will collapse and this chamber will be filled with rock. And I will still be here. The hum will still be here. A point of consciousness in a universe of stone. Waiting. Counting the drips. A single drop of water hangs from a stalactite above me. I can hear it swelling, growing heavy. It will fall soon. That is the next event. I focus on it. It is everything.